miners. Recently returned from a 5-month visit to England is Headlines Theatre, David Diamond, and he's joined us in the studio. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
So how long were you there?
Actually, I was in Britain for 5 months.
Right.
And went to 2 different mining areas. The first one was just outside Manchester, the Bold Pit, and that was just 1 day. And that was sort of a picket thing, picket deal, horses, riot gear, the whole thing. It was very, very scary. And then I went to a little place called Clipstone, which is outside Mansfield in Nottinghamshire.
And where is that? Just for those of us who, it's north of London, right?
Yeah, it's northeast
Okay.
of London. Now, something should be understood about Nottinghamshire, and that's where, in the 26th strike, the Spencerist Union began. People who don't understand that, the strike was broken by a breakaway union. That union was funded by the National Coal Board. And that's the process, although people don't understand anything about funding now. They don't know, really. But that's the process that's happening again, is that Nottinghamshire is traditionally a very conservative area, and there's been a breakaway union in Nottinghamshire again.
So you spent a fair bit of time in Nottinghamshire and got a chance to talk to a lot of people there.
Yeah, I spent about 3-4 days in Clipstone. All the interviews on this tape take place in a soup kitchen, so all the clanging and stuff that you hear is that.
So we can transport ourselves to being there. Well, what kinds of things did you find people talking about and dealing with when they were hanging around the soup kitchen?
Well, generally, things break down to 3 levels. First of all, there's an incredible amount of media bias. To give you an example of that, every day on the BBC in the evening news, you get the National Coal Board's figures of what they call new faces. Every day. What you never get is the fact that people who are at work or back at work are also coming out again. But nobody ever publishes those. So the stats just build up. Now, the NCB is also doing things like, particularly in Nottinghamshire, paying working miners very large sums of money, putting them on buses with police escorts, driving them into Yorkshire, which is a militant area, and having them cross picket lines in areas where they're not working. They, again, are counted as new faces. And it's interesting that they're going in with police escort, because that means the government knows what's going on and has continually said it's not involved. More than anything, they're dealing with a lot of violence. We're dealing with a situation here where police are breaking into people's homes in the middle of the night with their badges covered up so you don't know who they are, and beating them up.
Yeah, we don't hear about that here.
No, you don't hear about that because, of course, there are never any cameras around.
Okay, our first clip is, I guess, a conversation that you had with a fellow exactly about what has been going on.
You get these things reported in isolation. You know, in the it gets a brief mention as it whisks by on the news, and all that the concentration is on probably one bit of violence that's distorted anyway. You know, without showing police violence, and all the terror that's happening, it's not being shown. And I mean, all the incidents we know about and that have happened, when it's all over and quiet, you can read a long article in the better class newspaper, the Guardian or the Sunday Observer or the Times. Well, I don't know about the Times, but the Guardian definitely. There was one in this beginning of this week telling you about how Corton Wood was sealed off and what happened in the village. Now, this was briefly mentioned on television, and where people who work for the local council were beat up by the police, where kids were beat up by the police, where houses were invaded and people assaulted in the houses by police in riot gear. We're talking about fascism.
How do the people deal with that level of violence? Like, if you're not safe in your home at night.
Well, actually, I'm quite surprised that the miners have shown as much restraint, to use a nice word, as they have. They're dealing with a situation where things that were legal, that new laws are being passed to make them illegal.
Like what?
Well, for instance, we were on picket duty in Clipstone, and the police there had decided at that time that more than 2 people was a crowd. And so if there are more than 2 of you at any place at once, they'd come and tell you to move along. If you don't move along, they tell you again. If you say, well, why? We say so. What if I don't? I'll arrest you. For what? Obstruction. Move along. No. Push.
Mm.
And if you push back, then you're arrested for assaulting an officer.
It's a lot of provocation.
We did a lot of talking about the taxi driver, you know, the taxi driver who was murdered, and I didn't talk to anybody who didn't condemn that. These are people who are not, I mean, they've all their lives been law-abiding citizens. They've been now put in a situation where the state is forcing them to react violently so that they can then clamp down on them.
You have another little clip from a woman that you talked to exactly about that topic.
They've been arrested for no good reason and charged with with charges that were brought in the 1900s or something, 1860 or something. Stupid laws that they never normally use, only unless they can't really find a charge to charge them with. I mean, we got a friend and he went to a rally and do you know what they charged him with? Vagrancy, because he'd got hardly any money in his pocket. They charge you with anything. Standing on a public highway, your obstruction, anything, they'll just charge them with. Now, we have football hooligans in this country, and they run the streets and people are fighting downtown in years past. You never see them round them up and say, look, you've got to go back home.
Yeah, football hooligans, we've heard a lot about them. Did you get first-hand accounts of personal confrontations with the police? And
Oh, yeah,
kind of
certainly.
thing?
People are really eager to share those stories because the media isn't dealing with them.
Right.
For instance, well, we're going to go to a different story, but I'll just tell you another short one.
Okay.
I had an encounter with an 82-year-old man who's retired, who has been a labor organizer all his life. Now, these are small communities, so everybody knows who everybody is. He was on his way in his car to visit his daughter. The police stopped him at a roadblock, pulled him out, beat him up, and left him on the side of the road.
An 82-year-old
An
man.
82-year-old guy. This guy wasn't doing anything.
I guess they got him because he had been a former
organizer.
organizer.
The story that we're going to listen to is a group of guys, 4 or 5 guys, who are actually on their way to get away from the pit. They've sort of had enough, and they want a day off, and they're going out into the country in a car. And, of course, the police know that they're striking minors.
So we're stopped again, and the policeman said, where are you going? So we said, we're Scunthorpe for the day out. So he says, what's your occupation? So we said, oh, we're Nottinghamshire miners. Can I swear? And he said, you mean you're fucking scabs, aren't you? He says, you mean you're fucking pickets, aren't you? So we said, no, we are Nottinghamshire miners. We've come out of the Nottinghamshire coalfield to get away from the picket lines. So he says, well, I'm telling you to turn this fucking car around or you will be arrested. So the driver of the car said, look, we've done nothing wrong. What are you going to arrest us for? So the copper says, well, I'll find something. So the driver said, well, I am not turning this vehicle round. He says, we've done nothing wrong, we're proceeding to Scunthorpe. So the driver wound his window back up and locked the doors of the car, because this time the police were becoming very aggressive towards him. So this policeman said to one of the sergeants, Sergeant, these bastards in this car will not turn the car around, will I smash the window? So the sergeant says, oh, fuck that. He says, come out the way, I'll do it. So the sergeant come up to the car, drew his truncheon out and smashed the side window of the car. The door was unlocked. One of the police officers grabbed the driver round the throat and started pulling him out with the seatbelt on. But the passenger at the side of him had to loosen the seatbelt off, or he would have done some damage to the driver.
Just to finish this guy's story off a little bit, he finally got out of the backseat of the car. He was smoking a cigarette. The police told him to put it out. He refused. He was grabbed by, 4 or 5 policemen who sort of tackled him, sat on him for a while, threw him up in the air, right, up and down on the air, threw him into a van, handcuffed him. He was then charged with obstruction and released on the bail conditions that he reports to the Mansfield police station 3 times a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
These guys were on the way out to the country.
We've heard reports about how women are playing quite an important role in the miners' strike. Did you get a chance to talk to women about how they perceive their role in the miners' strike?
Yeah, You know, everybody, I mean, everybody in Britain is saying that the women have been the backbone of this strike, and if it wasn't for them, it would have ended a long, long time ago. They really emerged as an incredible political force. It's really amazing to see what's happening to them.
We were all very naive. We never believed. We thought if somebody got arrested, they must have done something. They must have done something wrong, or else they wouldn't have got arrested. Because I firmly believe that our police and that were wonderful, but I wouldn't give them that the time of day.
They also call Margaret Thatcher Iron Lady, but she don't realise there's a hell of a lot of iron women at this side of the fence who is determined. We'll fight her. It's not just men that's fighting her, not the striking miners who's fighting her, it's the wives as well. And we're just as strong and just as iron as what she is, only there's a hell of a lot more of us than there is of her.
That was really inspiring.
She's great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So what kind of role are the women taking? Like you mentioned that the perception is that they are the backbone of the strike. Their level of organizing, I'm assuming they're helping out in the food, the food kitchens.
Yeah, they're doing all
and
the
that kind
food
of thing.
stuff. They're handling most of the money, clothing collections. They're on picket lines, and because of the structure that exists in the communities between the men and the women, they're usually together in the background.
Right.
But they go there, and it's understood that that's where they're going to be, and they're there to lend their support. I have an interesting sort of just story. A striking miner gets £7 a week. That's about just over $10, $10 or $11 a week in strike pay. There's not a lot of money. And what they're doing, what the people who I was staying with were doing, were going to the bar and the disco at night
with their
that
£7.
money. And the reason they were doing that was because they didn't want their friends who were working to see that they were suffering.
There must be incredible splits in the communities that are happening between the people who are working and the people who've decided to stay out.
Yeah, I never quite figured out how they were dealing with that, because you go into a disco and there's people dancing and they have a lot of money and they're having a great time, and you're standing there in the middle of it and you're really outcast.
Right. Okay, now let's get back to the women and their level of organizing. Did you get a sense from them that that their work would continue?
Oh, they talk about starting a women's movement. That things are never going to be the same. They're never going to go back to their kitchens and be the sort of the housewives, quote unquote, that they have been. That this is the beginning of something that isn't going to end.
They'll say, oh well, my vote's not going to do any good. Of course it does some good. It makes sure that last time a lot of people, I'm sure Maggie once got in, if it was all the unemployed voted and all the working class people voted, but they can't be bothered. But you get money people, they always take the time to vote.
Yeah.
They'll not. They look after each other.
Well, there's 26 groups of us like this one here. There's 26 in Nottinghamshire. And we've all vowed that when this is all over, we're not just going to break up and go back to our own way, back to our humdrum life, washing and cleaning, because we're involved now.
I think we're more politically aware.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
And we know where we're going to break up when strike's over. We're going to start a women's movement, because there's that many women involved. Not one of the ladies want to change. We want to keep together, and we're going to start some kind. I don't care whether it's something for working class, like we have been doing. Don't care what it is. We've vowed and declared it's not one group wants to break up. We're still going to go on doing something, some way or another. You know what I mean?
And that was one of the women that you talked to who was organizing.
That's right. I've got a great picture of her with this flat of eggs sort of all tilting over, huge smile on her face, coming out of the soup kitchen, just beaming.
Yeah, it must be an incredible experience.
There's an amazing amount of power involved in what's going on there.
Well, even though that there's a lot of power going on, and they still are organizing, and they still are managing after 11 months to continue this strike, it seems inevitable that at some point they're going to have to go back down into the pits.
Yeah.
you know, and given the fact that communities are split, like we were talking about earlier, did any of the miners talk about what they figured might happen when they had to go back underground?
Well, I think at the moment that's one of the major concerns. And to tell you the truth, I think that this guy can say it much better than I can. So why don't we just go straight to it?
Well, they get on about intimidation. In the Nottinghamshire county, striking miners in the minority. And I've got a feeling that there's going to be a lot of intimidation by working miners to the strikers when you go underground. You know, and there's no doubt about that. Them men, and there's threats come to me and said, when I start back to work, there's men that are ready for me going back. And these men have said they'll trap us when I go back to work.
And that was another miner talking about the intimidation that they feel they're going to experience when they go under the pit, go back into the pit. Now, given the situation here in BC, and given the fact that our provincial government sort of seems bound and determined to provoke our unions to a certain extent, are there things that they, you know, I'm assuming that you told them about our situation,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it just sort of seems like a natural. Did they offer you any advice, or, you know, what did they have to say about it?
Well, they were very interested in what was happening in other parts of the world. The solidarity, for instance, with Nicaragua is very, very strong, and the support coming from Central America and South Africa, is the South African miners, is very, very strong. And it's something that's really surprised them, I think. So yeah, we did talk about BC. Let's listen to that clip, and then we'll discuss it out here a little bit.
The people in Canada have got to defend the class. It's all a class war now, and people are looking in on this dispute from all over the world, and if Thatcher wins and the establishment wins, it'll give a bit of a boost and an encouragement to the class, to the ruling class and to the establishment throughout the rest of the world to attack their workers the same way as Thatcher's attacking us now.
That was one of the miners that you met in Soup Kitchen there.
In Clipstone, yeah. You know, it's been interesting for me coming back after 5 months
Right.
involved in this, because I come back with sort of fresh eyes in a way. And it's become fairly obvious to me, or apparent to me, that what's happening here is very similar to what built up to this strike. We can't forget that British Columbia, Vancouver in particular, but all of the province, exists on what's going to be an explosion in the Pacific Rim. And the Socred government is vying to be a leader in Pacific Rim development. Now, in order to do that, a number of things have to happen to the population here. We have to break the unions, and we have to turn the population into a service sector, right? So, for instance, if you cut down education, if you go back to the so-called basics, what you're doing is you're creating a next generation whose skills are to serve the multinationals. Basic computer skills, basic communicative skills, but not the ability to think for themselves and question. And that's happening, it seems to me, all across the board.
So what can we learn?
We can learn, I suppose, that we just can't let them do it. That's what we can learn.
And you picked up some courage from the miners on that
A
one,
lot of
right?
courage and a lot of inspiration. It was said to me, actually, in Edinburgh, that you have to make a decision whether you're running with the fox or the hounds. And once that becomes clear and the decision is made, then your options are, your decisions are made for you.
Thank you. We've been talking to David Diamond about the British coal miners' strike.